On a quiet evening, a high-ranking black police captain was driving home, finally heading to unwind after a long day. He was off duty, dressed casually, and feeling relieved to be done with a tough shift. His mind wandered to family plans, what he'd cook for dinner, and thoughts of unwinding on the couch. Just as he made a turn onto a familiar road, red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. A police car was following him, siren blaring, urging him to pull over. Slightly annoyed, but understanding the routine, he calmly pulled his car to the side. He thought this must be some mistake. Maybe they were looking for someone else or doing a random check. He reached into his glove box to get his driver's license and registration, knowing it would be quick to clear up once he explained his position and showed his ID. As the officer approached his window, it was clear from the young cop's expression that he'd already made up his mind about the man he'd stopped. He wore a serious, almost confrontational look, and the captain noticed it right away. The young officer didn't ask any standard questions like he'd expect. No, good evening, or do you know why I stopped you? Instead, he seemed tense, and his tone was anything but polite. The captain, choosing patience, calmly asked, "Is there a reason you pulled me over, officer?" The young cop, visibly uncomfortable, mumbled something about a suspicious vehicle and a possible traffic violation. It was vague, even by traffic stop standards, and the captain knew right away that something wasn't right. But he remained calm, holding back any reaction. He simply asked, "Could you be more specific about what I did wrong?" Instead of responding with details, the officer's tone grew firmer. It was as if the cop was more interested in asserting control than in explaining anything clearly. He looked at the captain's casual clothes, perhaps judging him based on appearance alone, as though he were automatically guilty of something. This was not the captain's first time handling a tense situation, but tonight felt different. He'd never been on this side of a police stop, and he felt a mixture of anger and sadness creeping in. But he wasn't ready to reveal his identity just yet. He wanted to see how this cop, who clearly hadn't recognized him, would handle the situation if he thought he was just an ordinary citizen. The young officer repeated that he needed to see his ID. The captain nodded, calmly reaching for his badge, tucked beside his license. As he handed both over, he kept his gaze steady, observing every detail of the officer's reaction. The young cop's face went pale. His eyes darted from the badge to the man in the driver's seat, finally realizing who he'd stopped. It was a moment of recognition, and it was clear that he hadn't expected this. The officer stammered, lost for words, trying to cover his tracks. But the captain remained quiet, waiting to see if the young cop would take responsibility or simply make excuses for his behavior. The young officer stood there, looking flustered and unsure. His face showed a mix of embarrassment and fear. He knew he had made a mistake, and the realization hit him hard. For a moment, it was quiet. The captain watched as the young officer's mind raced, clearly trying to figure out how to handle this unexpected turn of events. The captain decided to break the silence. "It seems like you've got a lot to think about right now," he said calmly. His voice was steady, trying to keep the tension from escalating further. He wanted to turn this uncomfortable situation into a moment of reflection, not conflict. "I understand that you're just doing your job, but you should know that stops like this can have serious consequences." The officer shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly struggling to respond. "I didn't mean to," he stammered, searching for the right words. "I just saw you driving and thought something was off." The captain took a deep breath. He could sense the officer's hesitation and realized this might be a chance to educate him. "What was it about my driving that seemed suspicious?" he asked gently. "Was I speeding? Swerving? Or did it just look like I didn't belong on the road?" The officer looked down, unable to meet the captain's gaze. It was as if he was grappling with the realization that he had let his biases cloud his judgment. I don't know. I guess I just assumed." "Assumed what?" the captain pressed, wanting the officer to understand the impact of his assumptions. That because of my skin color, I was up to no good. That's what profiling is, and it's a serious issue. The young officer's face turned red with shame. I'm sorry, he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to profile you. I didn't think. Not thinking can lead to problems, both for you and for the people you stop, the captain replied. He spoke with the kind of authority that came from years of experience in law enforcement, but he did it with a softness that showed he genuinely cared about making a change. Every interaction counts. You have the power to make a difference in people's lives, for better or worse. As the young officer listened, the gravity of the moment began to sink in. He seemed to realize that being a police officer wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was also about building trust within the community. The captain could see the wheels turning in his mind as he pondered how his actions might have affected not only this encounter, but countless others. After a moment, the officer took a deep breath and nodded. You're right. I need to do better. I want to do better. This is not how I want to serve my community. The captain smiled, appreciating the young officer's willingness to learn and grow. We all have room for improvement. It's what we do with these moments that matters, he said. It's important to have these conversations, even when they're uncomfortable. The young officer finally met the captain's gaze, a newfound respect in his eyes. Thank you for not losing your cool, he said sincerely. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. In that moment, the tension began to fade. The captain realized that they were both part of the same larger community, and though their paths had crossed in a troubling way, there was potential for growth and understanding. He hoped this interaction would be a turning point, not just for the young officer, but also for the community they both served. As the conversation continued, the young officer looked more relaxed, his body language shifting from defensive to open. The captain saw this change and felt encouraged. It was clear that the young man was beginning to understand the impact of his actions. This was not just a moment of confrontation, but a chance for growth. Let me ask you something, the captain said thoughtfully. What kind of officer do you want to be? The question hung in the air, giving the young officer a moment to reflect. He scratched his head, looking genuinely puzzled. I want to be a good officer, someone people can trust, he finally replied. But sometimes it feels like I'm just following orders, you know? I don't want to be seen as the bad guy. The captain nodded, understanding where he was coming from. It's important to remember that you're not just following orders. You're making decisions every day that affect people's lives. Being a good officer means thinking critically about those decisions, even when it's uncomfortable. The officer frowned, absorbing the weight of those words. I get that. It's just hard sometimes, especially when you're new on the job and trying to prove yourself. I want my partners to see me as capable. I thought being tough was the way to do that. That's a common misconception, the captain said, his tone encouraging. Being tough doesn't mean you have to be aggressive. Real strength comes from showing understanding and compassion. Those qualities help build trust with the community, which is crucial in your line of work. The young officer nodded slowly, seeming to digest this new perspective. I've never thought about it that way. I guess I've been so focused on the badge that I forgot what it really represents. Exactly, the captain replied. It represents safety, service, and community. When people see a police officer, they should feel safe and protected, not threatened. Your actions can help create that feeling. The officer shifted his weight again, glancing around as if taking in his surroundings for the first time. You're right. I need to remember that every time I put on this uniform, I'm a representative of something bigger. Absolutely, the captain said, smiling. And it's up to you to decide what kind of representation you'll be. It can start right here, right now. Just then, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, pulling both their thoughts back to the reality of their jobs. The captain took a moment to gauge the officer's reaction, noting how he straightened up at the sound. It was a reflex, a reminder of the duty that awaited him. You know, the captain continued, sometimes, after a moment like this, officers feel compelled to brush it aside and move on. But this is your chance to reflect and improve. Think about how you can make a difference with every interaction, even the small ones. The young officer looked thoughtful. You're giving me a lot to think about. I want to make sure my next traffic stop isn't just about the rules, but about treating people with respect and dignity. The captain nodded approvingly. That's the spirit. It takes time, and you'll make mistakes along the way, but what matters is your willingness to learn and grow from those experiences. With a newfound determination, the young officer smiled. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I didn't expect this stop to turn into a life lesson. The captain chuckled lightly. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments teach us the most. Just remember, the real test is how you choose to act from here on out. As they prepared to part ways, both men felt the weight of the moment. They had taken a significant step toward understanding and healing, proving that even a difficult encounter could become a turning point for change. As the captain and the young officer prepared to wrap up their conversation, the atmosphere began to shift. The tension that had filled the air earlier was now replaced by a sense of mutual respect and understanding. The captain felt relieved. He had hoped this moment would spark something positive, and it seemed to be working. Before I go, the captain said, I want to share something that has always helped me in my career. It's about being a part of the community. He paused, making sure the young officer was engaged and ready to listen. You see, being a police officer isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about being a part of people's lives. The young officer looked intrigued. What do you mean by that? He asked, eager to learn more. Well, the captain continued, when I started, I realized that many people in the community see officers as either protectors or enforcers. But often, they just see a uniform. If we want them to see the person behind the badge, we need to connect with them on a human level. The officer nodded, processing this idea. That makes sense. But how do you connect with people who might be afraid of the police? Good question, the captain replied. It's about building trust. Sometimes, that means going to community events, participating in local sports, or even just being present in neighborhoods. It shows people that we care about them, not just when something goes wrong, but also when everything is okay. The young officer seemed to reflect on this. So, it's not just about wearing the badge, it's about earning respect through actions, right? Exactly, the captain exclaimed. When you show up in the community, not just in uniform, but as a person, it breaks down barriers. You become more than just a figure of authority. You become someone they can talk to, someone they trust. He could see the young officer's expression change. The light of understanding was brightening in his eyes. I want to do that, he said eagerly. I want to be someone people feel comfortable approaching. I don't want to be feared. That's a great goal, the captain encouraged him. And remember, every small interaction counts. A smile, a wave, or just listening to someone can change how they see you. It shows that you're not just there to enforce laws, but to support and protect them. As they talked, the young officer began to open up about his own experiences. Sometimes, I feel pressure from my colleagues to act tough. It's like there's an expectation to show strength, even when it doesn't feel right. The captain leaned in, understanding the weight of that statement. It's tough, I get it. But true strength lies in doing what's right, even if it goes against the norm. If you stand firm in your values, others will notice and may even follow your lead. The young officer looked inspired. You know, I've been thinking about ways to improve my approach to the job. Maybe I could organize some community events where officers can meet residents outside of stressful situations. Now that's a fantastic idea, the captain responded enthusiastically. Events like that can help bridge the gap and foster a sense of belonging. It's about showing that you're there for them, not just as an authority figure, but as a neighbor and a friend. Feeling energized, The young officer began to brainstorm. Maybe we could hold some open forums where people can come and talk about their concerns. That way, we can understand what the community needs and how we can help. I love that, the captain said, feeling hopeful about the potential for change. Engaging in real conversations can break down barriers. People need to feel heard and understood. It's not just about policing, it's about partnership. They both stood there for a moment, reflecting on the conversation. The captain felt proud of the young officer's willingness to change, and he hoped this was the beginning of a new path for him. As they shook hands to say goodbye, the captain felt a sense of accomplishment. Remember, change takes time, but every step counts, the captain said, smiling. You're on the right track. Keep pushing for what's right. With that, the young officer nodded, a newfound determination in his eyes. He watched as the captain drove away, feeling inspired and ready to embrace his role in a new light. This moment had transformed him, and he was eager to take the lessons learned back to his job, hoping to make a real difference in his community. As the captain drove away, he felt a sense of relief mixed with hope. He had not only avoided a potentially explosive situation, but he had also opened a door for change. The young officer had shown a willingness to learn, and that was a promising sign. He knew that conversations like theirs could create ripples of understanding and perhaps even reshape the culture within the police department. Meanwhile, the young officer stood by the side of the road, feeling a wave of inspiration wash over him. As he watched the captain drive off, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a routine traffic stop. It was a wake-up call, pushing him to rethink his approach to policing. He realized he wanted to be the kind of officer who would be seen as a protector, not just an enforcer of the law. Over the next few days, the young officer began to reflect deeply on what he had learned during their conversation. He realized that he had been so focused on following orders and proving himself to his colleagues that he had lost sight of what it meant to serve the community. He wanted to change that. One evening, he decided to reach out to some of his colleagues to share his thoughts. At a team meeting, he spoke up, trying to convey the importance of community engagement. I had a really eye-opening experience recently, he started, feeling nervous but determined. I stopped a man who turned out to be a high-ranking officer. Instead of escalating the situation, we had a conversation about how we can better connect with our community. His colleagues listened intently, some raising their eyebrows in surprise. What do you mean? One officer asked, curious. I mean that we need to think about how our actions impact the people we serve. People aren't just numbers or cases. They're our neighbors, our friends, he explained passionately. When we pull someone over or respond to a call, we should be aware of how they might perceive us. Building trust is just as important as enforcing laws. Some officers nodded in agreement, while others looked skeptical. The young officer pressed on, determined to shift their perspective. We could host community events, like coffee mornings or open forums, where people can come and talk to us. It could help us understand their concerns and show them we care. A senior officer spoke up. That sounds good in theory, but do you really think people will come? They might be afraid or distrustful of us. I understand that, the young officer replied. But isn't that exactly why we should try? If we don't make an effort to reach out, we'll never break down those barriers. The more we engage with the community, the more they'll see us as allies rather than adversaries. His enthusiasm began to catch on. One by one, his colleagues started to voice their support. They discussed ideas for local events, brainstorming ways to make a genuine connection with the community. The conversation sparked excitement, and the young officer felt encouraged by the growing momentum. Over the next few weeks, they organized their first community event, a casual coffee meetup at a local park. They advertised it on social media, hoping to draw in residents from various neighborhoods. On the day of the event, the officers set up tables and brought coffee, donuts, and snacks. At first, only a few people showed up, but gradually more residents arrived, curious about what the officers had to say. The atmosphere was relaxed, with laughter and chatter filling the air. The young officer felt a surge of hope as he saw families enjoying the morning and engaging in conversations with the officers. As they interacted with community members, the officers listened to concerns about safety, local issues, and the challenges residents faced. They shared stories, laughed, and built connections. The young officer realized that this was exactly what he had hoped for: a chance to humanize the badge and bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. By the end of the event, many residents expressed their appreciation for the officers' efforts. "This was great. We should do this more often," one resident said, smiling. The young officer felt a sense of pride swell within him. This was just the beginning, but he could already see the positive change taking place. As he looked around at the people mingling and enjoying each other's company, he felt grateful for the captain's wisdom that had inspired him. It was clear that real change was possible, one conversation at a time. The young officer walked away from the event feeling empowered, knowing that he could make a difference, not just for himself, but for the entire community. After the successful coffee meetup, the young officer felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had witnessed firsthand how open conversations could transform relationships between police officers and the community. The experience had ignited a passion in him that he was eager to explore further. He knew they couldn't stop at just one event. There was so much more work to be done. In the days that followed, he began brainstorming ideas for more community engagement activities. He gathered his colleagues, sharing his vision for a series of events that could foster trust and understanding. "What if we organize family fun days or community cleanup events?" he suggested. "We could even partner with local schools to host educational workshops about safety and law enforcement." His colleagues were enthusiastic, excited about the possibilities. They agreed to create a schedule for upcoming events, and everyone contributed their ideas. Some suggested sports activities, while others thought about workshops focused on self-defense and conflict resolution. The young officer felt a sense of camaraderie building among the team, all united in a common goal. As they planned, the young officer reached out to community leaders and local organizations. He wanted to ensure that they included diverse voices in their events. He knew that different communities had different needs and concerns, so it was essential to listen and adapt. Many leaders were happy to collaborate, and this further solidified the young officer's commitment to making a meaningful impact. Soon, the team was busy promoting their first family fun day, complete with games, food, and activities for kids of all ages. They posted flyers in local shops and shared information on social media. The excitement in the air was palpable. The young officer felt a sense of pride as he watched the community respond positively. On the day of the event, the park buzzed with energy. Families arrived early, eager to enjoy the day. The officers set up booths, games, and activities, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and smiles. The young officer felt a warm glow of satisfaction as he greeted families, introducing himself and his colleagues. As children played games, parents chatted with officers, asking questions about safety and sharing their thoughts on how the police could better serve the community. The young officer listened carefully, taking notes and making mental reminders of the concerns expressed. He felt a sense of responsibility to ensure that these voices were heard and addressed. One father approached him, looking concerned. "My kids sometimes feel nervous when they see police cars. How can we change that?" he asked. The young officer nodded thoughtfully. "That's a great question. We're here to show that we're not just authority figures. We want to be friends and allies. By hosting events like this, we hope to change that perception over time. It's all about building trust, one conversation at a time." The father smiled, appreciating the officer's honesty. "I appreciate that. It means a lot to see you here, talking to us instead of just enforcing rules. My kids are excited to meet officers who care." Throughout the day, the young officer found himself engaging in meaningful conversations. He realized how crucial it was for officers to be approachable and relatable. The more he spoke with the community, the more he understood their perspectives, fears, and hopes. As the sun began to set, the young officer looked around the park. The laughter of children mixed with the chatter of adults, creating a joyful symphony. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what he had wanted all along. A chance to connect and build a community where everyone felt safe and respected. By the end of the event, people were leaving with smiles, waving goodbye to the officers. The young officer felt a wave of hope wash over him. They had planted the seeds for change, and he knew they could continue to nurture those seeds in the weeks and months to come. He walked away from the park that day with a renewed commitment. This was just the beginning of a long journey toward healing and understanding. Together with his colleagues, he would keep working to bridge the gap between the police and the community, one event at a time. He couldn't wait to see what the future held. After the success of the Family Fun Day, the young officer felt a sense of momentum building within his department and the community. Inspired by the positive feedback, he wanted to keep the momentum going. He started brainstorming ideas for the next community event, eager to build on the connections they had made. He gathered his team again, excited to share his thoughts. What if we hosted a community safety workshop next? We could teach families about crime prevention and how to stay safe, he suggested. His colleagues nodded, seeing the potential in this idea. One officer added, "We could invite local experts to talk about things like home security and personal safety. It would be a great way to empower residents." "Yes," the young officer replied, energized by the idea. "We want people to feel informed and confident about their safety. This can be a way to create a sense of partnership between us and the community." As they planned the workshop, they reached out to local organizations and experts who could help. They wanted to ensure the information shared was valuable and practical. They decided to invite a local crime prevention specialist who had experience working with neighborhoods to reduce crime rates. On the day of the workshop, the venue was buzzing with excitement. Families arrived, curious about what they would learn. The young officer felt a mix of nerves and anticipation as he welcomed everyone. He was grateful to see so many familiar faces from the fun day. "Thank you all for coming today," he said, standing at the front of the room. "We're here to share information that can help keep you and your families safe. We believe that by working together, we can make our community a better place." The crime prevention specialist began the workshop, discussing various topics, from securing homes to recognizing suspicious behavior. The young officer noticed how engaged everyone was, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. It was evident that people wanted to be involved in their safety. During a break, families mingled, and the young officer took the opportunity to connect with attendees. He spoke with a mother who had attended the previous event. "I really appreciate all you're doing," she said. "It's nice to see officers out here, taking the time to talk to us." "Thank you for coming," he replied, feeling a warm sense of gratitude. "It means a lot to know that we're making a difference." As the workshop continued, participants discussed the importance of community watch programs. The young officer felt inspired by the enthusiasm in the room. People wanted to take an active role in their safety, and he knew this was a perfect opportunity to encourage that spirit. After the presentation, he gathered everyone together again. "I want to suggest that we start a neighborhood watch program," he announced. "This could be a great way for us to work together, watch out for one another, and build stronger connections within our community." A man from the crowd spoke up. "That sounds like a great idea. We need to look out for each other, and having regular meetings would help keep everyone informed." "Exactly," the young officer replied, his excitement growing. "We can hold regular meetings to discuss concerns and share information. It's about creating a network of support." As people began discussing the logistics, the young officer felt a sense of pride. This was the kind of engagement he had envisioned when he first spoke up about community events. They were no longer just talking. They were taking action together. As the workshop came to a close, families left with not only new knowledge, but also a sense of empowerment. The young officer could see the change taking root. This was a community coming together, united by a shared goal of safety and connection. Later that evening, as he reflected on the day, he felt grateful for the journey he had embarked on. He knew that building trust and community took time and effort, but every step forward was worth it. He felt a renewed commitment to this path, ready to keep pushing for positive change in his community. The young officer realized that he was not just a police officer anymore. He was becoming a vital part of a community that was learning to trust one another. And he couldn't wait to see where this journey would take them next. With the Neighborhood Watch program officially underway, the young officer felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was excited to see the community taking such an active role in their safety and well-being. But he also knew that keeping this momentum going would require dedication and consistent effort. Over the next few weeks, he focused on recruiting more participants for the Neighborhood Watch. He visited local community centers and spoke at schools, sharing the benefits of being involved. He emphasized how the program could help everyone feel safer and more connected. His enthusiasm was contagious, and people began to sign up, eager to join the initiative. As more residents became involved, they held their first official meeting. The young officer arranged for everyone to gather in a local community hall. On the day of the meeting, he arrived early to set up chairs and prepare materials. He felt a mix of excitement and nerves, wondering how many people would show up. As the start time approached, families began to trickle in, chatting and catching up with one another. The young officer smiled, seeing familiar faces from the previous events. This gathering felt more like a community reunion than a meeting, and he was glad to see everyone come together. When it was time to begin, he stood at the front of the room and welcomed everyone. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "We're starting this Neighborhood Watch program to help us all look out for one another and build a stronger, safer community." He outlined the goals of the program: to share information about local issues, to report suspicious activities, and to foster a sense of partnership between residents and law enforcement. The more he spoke, the more the room buzzed with energy. People were eager to contribute and share their thoughts. During the meeting, residents began sharing their concerns. One woman spoke about a rise in vehicle break-ins in her neighborhood. "It's been happening more often, and it makes me feel unsafe," she said. The young officer nodded, acknowledging her concern. "Thank you for bringing this up. We can work together to keep an eye out for each other and report anything suspicious." Another man raised his hand, sharing his own story. "I saw someone acting strangely around my neighbor's house last week. I wasn't sure if I should call it in or not," he said. "Now I know I can report those things." "That's exactly the kind of information we need," the young officer replied. "Every detail matters. If something feels off, it's always better to say something than to stay quiet." As the discussion continued, people began to feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts and experiences. They discussed strategies for keeping their homes safe and creating a network for communication. The young officer encouraged everyone to exchange phone numbers and contact information, emphasizing that they could create a group chat to stay connected. By the end of the meeting, the room was filled with a sense of unity and determination. People were eager to take action, and the young officer felt a swell of pride. He knew that this was just the beginning, but they were laying the foundation for a stronger community. After the meeting, several residents approached him, expressing their gratitude for organizing the program. "Thank you for bringing us together like this," one woman said. "It feels good to know we're not alone in this." The young officer smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment. "It's my pleasure. We're all in this together, and I'm here to support you every step of the way." In the following weeks, the Neighborhood Watch began to take shape. Residents communicated regularly, sharing updates and checking in on one another. The young officer joined the group chats, offering advice and answering questions. He felt encouraged by the engagement and commitment he saw in the community. One evening, as he patrolled the area, he noticed groups of neighbors chatting outside their homes, looking out for each other. It filled him with hope to see people building connections, knowing that they were taking responsibility for their safety together. Through these experiences, the young officer realized that the true essence of policing was not just about enforcing laws, but about fostering relationships and trust. He felt grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this journey. The Neighborhood Watch program was not just a project. It was a movement toward a safer, more connected community. The young officer looked forward to continuing this work, knowing that they were making a real difference, one day at a time. As the weeks turned into months, the Neighborhood Watch program grew stronger and more engaged. The young officer felt a sense of pride as he watched the community come together in ways he had only hoped for. Families were not just looking out for themselves. They were genuinely invested in the safety and well-being of their neighbors. This transformation was heartwarming and inspiring. One sunny Saturday, the young officer organized a neighborhood cleanup event. He wanted to give the community another chance to bond while beautifying their shared spaces. With the help of residents, they planned to clean up the local park, which had been neglected for too long. Everyone was excited, and they spread the word through flyers and social media, inviting all to join in. On the day of the cleanup, the park was filled with energy. Residents arrived with trash bags, gloves, and lots of enthusiasm. The young officer greeted everyone with a smile, feeling grateful for their willingness to participate. "Thank you all for coming out today. Together, we can make a big difference," he announced, feeling a surge of positivity. As they began cleaning, the community members worked side by side, chatting and laughing as they picked up litter and planted flowers. The young officer moved from group to group, offering encouragement and support. He loved seeing people who had once felt distant from each other now forming friendships. Neighbors were sharing stories about their lives, their families, and their hopes for the community. During a break, the young officer gathered everyone to thank them for their hard work. "Look at what we've accomplished together. This park looks amazing, and it's all thanks to you," he said, gesturing at the transformed space. "Not only have we made this place cleaner and safer, but we've also strengthened our connections." After the cleanup, the young officer organized a small picnic. He wanted to celebrate their hard work and foster even more community spirit. He provided snacks and drinks, encouraging everyone to relax and enjoy each other's company. As they ate and chatted, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and joy. People were genuinely happy to be together. As the sun began to set, one resident stood up to share her thoughts. "I just want to say how thankful I am for this Neighborhood Watch program. It has changed my perspective on safety and community," she said. "Before, I felt like I didn't know my neighbors or who to turn to. Now, I feel like we're all part of something special." The young officer smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment. Her words reflected everything he had hoped to achieve. This was not just about policing. It was about building trust and friendship. It was about creating a community where everyone felt valued and safe. As the evening continued, people exchanged contact information, planning future get-togethers and collaborations. The young officer could see that the Neighborhood Watch program was growing into something bigger than just a safety initiative. It was becoming a vital part of their lives. Over the next few months, the community planned more events: movie nights in the park, safety workshops, and holiday celebrations. Each gathering brought more people together, and the bonds between residents deepened. The young officer felt a strong sense of belonging as he became a part of their lives, sharing in their joys and challenges. One night, while on patrol, he received a call about a suspicious person in the neighborhood. Instead of feeling anxious, he felt confident. He knew the residents would look out for each other. He arrived to find several neighbors already gathered, discussing what they had seen. They worked together to keep an eye on the situation, reporting back to him with details. The incident turned out to be harmless, but the sense of community was undeniable. The young officer felt grateful to be part of a team, a community that cared for one another. He knew that the Neighborhood Watch had created a culture of vigilance, but more importantly, it had built trust among the residents. Reflecting on the journey, He realized that the work he and his colleagues had put into fostering relationships was paying off in ways they hadn't imagined. The trust they had built transformed not only how residents viewed the police, but also how they viewed each other. It was a beautiful reminder of the power of community and connection. With a heart full of hope, the young officer looked forward to the future. He knew that by continuing to work together, they could create a safer, stronger, and more connected community for everyone. And that was something truly special.